You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke Makenna, but today's video is the Road Hill House mystery. Now, this is a murder that went unsolved for years, and a new type of investigation that found out the truth and yet no one listened. Today, this is a technique that we use often and seems very common, and yet back then it's something that everyone believed was almost fiction. So I thought this would be a very interesting story to tell you guys from way back in the past. By the way, I'm posting so much content for Suspect Summer in July, so if it's something you are interested in, then please make sure to subscribe. Now let's get back to the story. It was the 1800s in England, and in the village of Road, which is in Wiltshire at the time, stood the Road Hill House, and its occupants were the Kent household. On the night of June 22nd, 1860, a 4-year-old, an almost 4-year-old Francis Saville Kent disappeared from his room on that very residence. He was not found until midnight the next day in the vault of their outhouse, still wearing his nightshirt and wrapped in a blanket. Francis had been stabbed in the chest, and his hands and his throat had been cut deeply. Now, everybody wanted to know what happened at the Road Hill House that night. Newspapers and Parliament alike were all spreading this news like crazy. Now, the first suspect was a woman named Elizabeth Gow, who was Francis's nursemaid and took care of him often. Now, she was arrested but quickly released after the police realized that she had nothing to do with it, and even had another suspect on their radar. But it wasn't really police who came up with this theory. It was a new type of police officer that was just being introduced to the Scotland Yard at the time, called detectives. It was the detective branch that was made of 8 detectives, including Inspector Jonathan, who actually went by Jack Witcher. You see, Jack looked at cases through scientific facts and logic, and he was even close to coming up with the idea of fingerprints. And yet everybody believed that all of his ideas were bogus, fiction, and wouldn't help at all. However, Jack was given this case to look over because he was so good, and everybody wanted his help, but nobody really wanted to take it when he gave it to them. You see, he could put the pieces of a case together like a jigsaw puzzle, but it made it even harder because since nobody believed him, they didn't keep clues, they didn't do anything with the crime scene, and so it had been all destroyed and walked upon by the time he got there. But Jack decided to head to the crime scene to see what he could do anyway, and there he met the Kent family. Now, the father of the house was a Samuel Kent, a government inspector at a factory, and he had 3 children, 2 teens, William and Constance, from a previous marriage, and then of course the 3-year-old Francis. Jack began questioning the family and the servants before going and doing an investigation of the actual crime scene, and only an hour after looking at what everyone else had previously looked at and not come up with any other theories besides the fact that it was the nurse, Jack came up with the fact that it was a different killer entirely, and he knew exactly who it was. The motive? Jealousy. The killer was actually 2 killers. 16-year-old Constance Kent and her brother William Kent. Now, Jack claimed that William and Constance had killed Francis because he was the new son and a new marriage, and they were jealous of him. However, the father Samuel was furious about these accusations and reported Jack to the Police Federation. Scotland Yard took this and just asked Jack to write a report about what he'd found, why he was accusing Francis's siblings of murdering their brother. And Jack wrote a complete report saying that the entire house was secured and locked, and there was no signs of anyone who had broken in, but there was smashed glass on the outside of the house indicating someone had broken out. Therefore, Jack believed that it had been done on the inside, and because there had been a recent new marriage, possibly the kids were angry with this new wife, and they were angry with a new brother and decided to murder them themselves. And Jack's reasoning for why they did it together, and it wasn't just one of them, was that he might have been too heavy to put down in this area. Constance was arrested on July 16th, however, I couldn't find if her brother was. or why he wasn't, because I don't think he was. But Constance didn't actually end up going to trial at all because the public believed that it was completely wrong for a working man to accuse a young woman of breeding. Now, she was released and Jack was mocked for this, and in fact, nobody would hire him, but he did his own thing. He decided to actually become the very first private eye detective and open his own business. His business did incredibly well, and after all of this, the Kent family actually moved to Wrexham, which is in the north of Wales, and Constance was actually sent to finishing school in Dinan, France. As adults, Constance and William would move to Australia, and they lived freely, and William was actually a famous photographer and a director of fisheries and an author. Constance was 21 at the time, and this is where her life would change, and this case would be looked at very differently. It was 1865, and she would make a confession to Reverend Arthur Wagner. Constance proceeded to tell him that that night she waited till the family and servants were asleep. Then she went downstairs in the drawing room, opened up the windows and the shutters, went to get Francis, put him in a wrapped blanket, took him outside where she killed him with a razor from her father. Now, Constance had apparently put matches all around the area of the outhouse where she would be dumping Francis's body, and this in fact confirmed that this was not a spontaneous accident. This was a premeditated murder. Constance made sure that it was clear that William did not help her with this and had nothing to do with it, and yet many believed that that wasn't true at all. However, she was put in London's Holloway Women's Jail for her sentence. For life, however, she would be transferred to many different prisons throughout her years, and 20 years into her sentence would be released. She was an ideal prisoner who would often make ceramic tiles for places like the St. Paul's Cathedral. She was very talented. But because of this, she would be released into the public once again and would live till 100 years old. Now, one of these tiles that she created was actually of a fat-faced little boy with wings on both sides of his head, and it was thought that this was possibly Francis, her brother. But there was another theory as to who had actually killed Francis, and that was that his father Samuel had done it, and that possibly Samuel was having an affair with Francis's nursemaid, and Francis saw this, so Samuel got rid of him. Now, you see, this wasn't just an out-of-the-blue theory that had nothing to back it up, because Samuel had already done this once before. Not the murder, but the cheating. You see, his first wife, Mary Ann Kent, he had cheated on her with the nursemaid, Mary Drew Pratt, and ended up having a baby with this nursemaid named Francis. So he cheated on his first wife with the maid and married her, and was thought to have cheated on his second wife with the maid as well. Though some say Constance wasn't covering up for her father but her brother, and that they had done it together. Just as Jack had said many years prior, and nobody listened. Now, Constance said she never had a jealousy for her little brother, and that's not why she did it. However, I'm not sure she ever said why the reason actually was. The year after Constance got out of jail, she rejoined her brother William in Australia and began training as a nurse under the name Ruth Emily Kay. She worked at many hospitals and schools and retirement homes until retiring herself in 1932. And 12 years later, on April 10th, Constance actually died at the age of 100. And what concerns me about that is how long she actually worked in schools and hospitals and everything after murdering her brother. That is the perfect opportunity. We've seen many times that nurses and doctors have such a weird control over you, and can often hurt many people without anybody noticing. So I truly hope that that wasn't the case with Constance, but I don't see how you could overlook that and not think that she possibly killed more after her own brother. But do you think William had anything to do with it? I feel that William and Constance had a very, very oddly close relationship. They were constantly moving to be together once again, and I'm not sure that either of them ever got married, and I just feel like maybe perhaps there was something deeper and more disturbing going on between the two of them from when they were teenagers. And if so, is that why they killed Francis? Did he know about their maybe intimate weird relationship that shouldn't have been going on, and they didn't want him to tell their father? Could that have been why? I mean, it's happened before, unfortunately. Or did the teens have nothing to do with it at all? I mean, I do think that it was someone in the family, but could it have been their father, or possibly the nursemaid, or possibly his own mother? I mean, maybe Samuel was cheating with the nursemaid, and so Francis's mother didn't want anything to do with him anymore, and a son connected them, and so she got rid of them. I mean, I hope that wouldn't be the case for your own child, but the other option is that they killed their own brother, so neither is really a great option here. And also, why do you think Constance confessed after 5 years? I mean, she wasn't even old enough where it was like on her deathbed. She just confessed when she was 21 years old. Was it eating her alive? Was she being pressured by someone? What do you think? I just thought this was a very interesting, old school type case. I know you guys really like these vintage cases, and I do too, but I'd love to hear your theories down below. And don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.